Did Kathleen Kennedy just seal her own fate with her latest response to fan criticism? After years of Star Wars fans feeling unheard and ignored, her bold declaration that the franchise won't change for its loyal audience has ignited a firestorm of debate. How did she respond to voices like the critical drinker, and why are her comments backfiring spectacularly? Stick around as we dive into the controversy, explore the fallout of her statement, and question whether Lucasfilm can really turn things around after a decade of disappointment. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of Star Wars, or is there hope for a comeback? Let's find out. But before we jump in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update on the latest Star Wars news, controversies, and more. Now let's get into it. It's no secret that the Star Wars franchise has faced significant criticism from fans in recent years, struggling to find success with its latest releases. A considerable amount of that dissatisfaction has been directed at Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, who ultimately makes the key decisions regarding the franchise. Fans feel justified in holding her accountable when they are unhappy with those decisions. Among the most prominent voices in the fan community are influencers like Critical Drinker and Star Wars Theory, who have provided constructive critiques about the direction of the franchise. With over 5 million followers combined, you'd think Lucasfilm would take their feedback seriously, as these creators represent the opinions of many dedicated fans. However, Kathleen Kennedy's response to their criticisms has been surprising. She stated that there would be no changes to Star Wars regardless of the complaints. This attitude seems dismissive of the very audience that the franchise aims to entertain. It's akin to a brand like Coca-Cola saying that customer preferences don't matter, which is simply absurd since customer satisfaction is the core of any business. The purpose of Star Wars should be to engage and delight its audience. When viewership ratings and audience scores plummet, it's clear that the franchise is missing the mark. Ignoring this feedback and even announcing an intention to do so doesn't seem like a wise strategy. Moreover, the only feedback that seems to have caught their attention are the negative comments directed at cast and crew members, which hardly represent the majority of fan sentiments. Let's be clear here, most of the criticism aimed at Star Wars isn't coming from a place of hate or bigotry, as some might claim. It's about the quality of the content. You can't just dismiss all fan feedback under that label when the majority of it is focused on legitimate concerns about storytelling and direction. If you're going to acknowledge part of the criticism, why not address all of it? Rather than brushing it off, Lucasfilm could admit that some recent Star Wars projects haven't hit the mark and that changes are needed. What makes this even more ironic is that Kathleen Kennedy, in a roundabout way, has already acknowledged these failures herself. Recently, headlines have reported that Kennedy is ready to retire but is waiting for a win before she steps down. By stating that, she's essentially admitting that things have not been going well for the franchise. This is a tacit admission that the backlash against projects like the Acolyte or the Disney Star Wars trilogy is justified not because of some external agenda, but because the storytelling simply hasn't resonated with the fans. The criticism from creators like the Critical Drinker isn't just noise, it reflects real dissatisfaction with the product. In fact, Kennedy's response to fans seems to contradict her own admission of failure. It's honestly frustrating. The idea of waiting for a win before stepping down is problematic in itself. As the head of a studio, you don't get infinite chances to keep trying until you succeed. In reality, you need to get it right most of the time, especially when you're dealing with massive budgets and a dedicated fan base who spends their hard-earned money on these projects. Success in this space isn't just optional, it's expected. Running a studio or a franchise is a lot like coaching a sports team. You can't keep losing games and expect to stay in charge. Eventually, if you keep delivering subpar results, you're going to lose your job. It's a cutthroat world, sure, but that's how it works when you're playing at this level. It's nothing personal, it's strictly business. When you're responsible for such massive amounts of money and such a large fan base, the stakes are high. So why is it that Hollywood sometimes seems to play by different rules? Take Bob Chapek, for example. He lost his position as CEO of Disney after a relatively short tenure. So clearly the company understands that failure at the top has consequences, which makes it even stranger that no significant changes have been made at Lucasfilm. And just to be clear, this isn't a personal attack on Kathleen Kennedy. I don't know her personally, but as a passionate fan who spends my hard-earned money on this franchise, I feel entitled to voice my concerns. Kennedy has been president of Lucasfilm since 2012, and in that time, you can count the successful projects on one hand. Isn't that a sign that something needs to change? It's hard to imagine any other leader, whether in Hollywood or any other industry, surviving that level of failure over such a long period without losing their job. And even if Lucasfilm does replace Kennedy, would that really fix the underlying problems? The reality is that Lucasfilm only has two major intellectual properties to work with: Star Wars and Indiana Jones. They've never really been set up to create original content, and it's possible that they've squeezed as much as they can out of those two franchises. Everything has a natural endpoint, after all. While Marvel has sustained success for decades thanks to a vast roster of characters and stories, Star Wars and Indiana Jones don't have that same depth or flexibility. So, will we ever see a time when Star Wars is finally over? Probably not. But even if it continues, is that really the right call? Honestly, it's hard to say. Right now, I honestly can't see anyone succeeding as president of Lucasfilm, at least when it comes to the movies and TV shows they're producing. Sure, I can see video games working, maybe even some comics, but as far as films and series go, things just don't look promising. Lucasfilm has become a studio that relies almost entirely on gimmicks to get audiences in the seats. Look at the recent Indiana Jones send-off, featuring an 80-year-old Harrison Ford doing stunts that are beyond what anyone his age should realistically be doing. Or the way they've turned to pandering. Using marketing tactics like this show is great because it has lots of women as a selling point. Now, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with diversity. But if the story was genuinely good, you wouldn't need to rely on gender or any other superficial aspect to market the movie. A great example is Bridesmaids. It didn't have to sell itself as a groundbreaking gender-based movie because the story was strong enough to stand on its own. So when Lucasfilm resorts to these kinds of marketing gimmicks, it's a clear sign they're running out of ideas. In my opinion, storytelling should be held in high enough regard that you only produce a movie when there's a compelling story to tell. Not just because you think you can trick enough people into watching it and make a quick buck. But hey, that's just my take. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.